and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this very special Mass Steel post game show. Right now, as the week number three, the day afternoon games have just come to a conclusion. We are now in the late hour games right now, but as you can see, join me here to the left of your screen. For those of you tuning in right now, you can see I got for many people who recognized him at CSR, he is now host of the Fans Corner, which was on CSR, ChicagoLandSportsRail.com. Now the Fans Core podcast that it has become. I'm talking about my man right there in the Bears jersey, rocking the gear, PaulyC right there. You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram at It's Me, PaulyC47. As for myself, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Project Richie for the Mass Steel Podcast. On Twitter, it is at Mass Steel CGR, and on Instagram at Mass Steel Nation right now as we get ready to get into it. Paul, I gotta say right now, both teams 3-0. Welcome to the 3-0 club.
Yeah.
And the Bears. I know more particularly for the Bears. I know my Steelers still got a little ways of work, doing good, statistically still doing all right, but I think a little bit more of the Bears fans got to feel a little bit more on edge. 2 out of the last 3 games. You got to start feeling like the cardiac kids. What's the nickname you got going on for this team right now, being down 16 points in the fourth?
Well, to do it back weeks like they've done is pretty amazing. It's like, I guess it's one of those things you glad that they have it in them. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show, man. And it's good to see you. Good to be talking sports again for first time in a while. But yeah, just to get right into it, man, what an amazing game! I mean, I watched it from start to finish. No turning it off. No, that's it. Or I watched it from beginning to end, and I was just amazed. You saw it all: turnovers. You said it, the big comeback. Atlanta, that's a whole nother story in it by itself. I mean, they got issues, but happy Bears are 3-0. I mean, it's now. I mean, we were kind of talking before the break or before we got on, and you said, is there a possible quarterback controversy? Yeah, I think we kind of got one right now. I mean, he played well. Talking about Nick Foles, obviously, I'm sure everyone saw who led the big comeback. Mitch Trubisky got benched in the third quarter. That surprised me. I was not expecting that. To me, that signaled a comeback for the Bears.
Yeah, I would have to somewhat agree. I mean, right now, both quarterbacks, as everyone may recall, I mean, when you're looking, especially Dan Graziano of ESPN, who's one of the guys who covers the Bears, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, basically, he said, like, in training camp, I mean, no one was a clear-cut runaway winner for this job, and we find it out instantly. And you kind of see what we mean right there. And I really felt like, for right now, as mentioned, I mean, this was pretty much Trubisky's job to lose. I mean, Foles, I think, had to do enough to take it. I mean, at the same time, too, when we look at it, I really do believe right now that for this contest, I mean, obviously there's some patience laxing right now. I mean, Trubisky did have an interception, as did Foles. Completing, 13 of 22, so his passing percentage wasn't all that high. Ended the game with a 72 QB rating. But, I mean,
Geico is giving
you
new
all
and
start to
current
wonder,
customers a 15% credit on their motorcycle policies with a Geico give back. Because we're committed for the long haul.
Touchdowns, 1 interception.
The credit lasts your full
But,
policy
at the same
term.
time, just for the defense to
Geico
hang
give
with
back,
it right there.
helping
talk about
riders focus on the road
they
ahead.
didn't really, quit or, bail when they had many opportunities in this contest right here. And, who knows? Maybe this could be something like a special season. For right now, the biggest fear I hear right now on the Bears side, I'm sure you already heard this too. And Schefter of ESPN mentioned this, that there's fears that Matt Nagy may have have a torn ACL in today's win. So he may be lost for a good chunk of time, if not.
Yeah, talk about. Sorry, there's just music going on.
Thing right there. Oh.
But yeah, Bears took. Hey, listen, they took some, took some casualties in this game. You said, Tariq Cohen. I think you mentioned Ginn. It's unfortunate. I mean, obviously, thankfully they got the win. But you mentioned Mitch. You said you're right. It was his job to lose, and you got to remember who the team that they were facing. Okay, for those who think Nagy might have been a little drastic and over, this was a team talking about the Atlanta Falcons defense that coming into this game was like second to last in the NFL in almost every category, and yet through 3 quarters they couldn't score. They looked in just completely flatlined as an offense, just against one of the worst defenses in the NFL coming into the game. So you got to remember, in greater context here, it's not like they were facing I'm trying to think of another good defense out there, like a Ravens defense or your Steelers who've been good. It was that you said it was his game to lose, and I think he was just trying something. I mean, it worked. It worked. Now, he said Foles did throw an interception, but there were 2 touchdowns that he threw that were taken away by basically great plays by the Atlanta Falcons DBs. I mean, just ripping the football out of Allen Robinson's hands. That was the interception. I can't really blame that one on him. For coming in cold, I thought he played pretty well. I honestly, I think you got to start him in the next game. And what does this do for Mitch? I don't know. And I just want to say, I'm not happy about this. I think we were talking before when we got on. I'm not happy about this in a way. I mean, Nick Foles is great that he came in and the Bears won, but Mitch was supposed to be the quarterback of the future. He was supposed to be the guy. He was supposed to be that franchise player who's going to lead the Bears to multiple Super Bowls for at least a decade, or just the guy the position of quarterback you don't have to worry about. And now look, I mean, Nick Foles, that's fine. He's fine for this season, but is that a long-term solution? I don't think so. So we're basically – is what we're saying now. We're back to square one.
And
I don't know.
The biggest thing that troubles me a little bit too, I mean, Tariq Cohen, that could be vitally huge for down the season right there. If that is a torn ACL right there, because if you think about when you have a struggling quarterback in the NFL right there, you usually like to have your running back and your tight end is kind of like your pair of dogs, like one of them being like your bulldog right there to kind of like help alleviate some of the pressure off, to kind of like move the ball a little bit more. Now you're going to be opening yourself up to a more, I think, vulnerable offense now a little bit in a way. I mean, I think it's just very vital right there. Tariq Cohen is probably like the closest thing we see on this Bears team for the last few years where it was coming up the ranks right now. I mean, you still got a guy like Allen Robinson right there, and that's about it. So, that's my only concern right there. So if you feel like we're having issue with the quarterback, I'm just curious how much the run game is going to couple with everything going on.
Yeah, it's something to keep an eye on. I mean, I like that Matt Nagy's actually running the football now. That's the one thing I have seen, to his credit, is it does seem like he's running the football more, at least more than he used to. Mitch, just like I said, you saw same old Mitch. You saw him struggling to throw downfield. I mean, he's great from 5 to 15 yards. Oh my God, he is fantastic. But you have to be able to stretch the field. You have to be able to take the top off of defense, as they say. I mean, if the defensive coordinator or the DBs know that you can't go a certain distance, they're just going to load up near the line of scrimmage, which is what I think what a lot of teams are doing. He was inaccurate again. It was just when Foles came in, it was a completely different story. And the biggest thing that I took from Foles coming in was look how much the tight end got involved in the offense once once Foles came into the game. I think he finished with like 6 receptions for 60 yards, something like that. He got the tight end more involved in it was there, which makes sense in Matt Nagy's system coming from Kansas City, where that we all know with Travis Kelce and how the tight end is just vital to Matt Nagy's system. And look what he did. He helped them move the chains and got them to score chains.
And I think another thing too. I mean, you really feel for like Matt Ryan, this Falcons team. I mean, the last couple of weeks. I mean, they've been losing some like heartbreakers lately. I mean, obviously they got slapped around in the Seattle game in the first game, but I mean the last 2 games when you score about 39, 38 points, where it was against the Dallas Cowboys, then they have a 16-point lead. I believe it was in the fourth quarter at that point in time. Both of those losses right there and to be at 0-3 right there. I mean, I said it to you yesterday. I really believe it's a matter of time for him and that team to hit that stride. But when you get to that place right now, I wonder what's got to do for like the Falcons' confidence going forward. I don't know about you, Paul.
Yeah, that's bad because Falcons shouldn't have lost that
clutch
game.
In those moments.
Yeah, you have to finish. You have to finish. And the way that the game was going, it was like a complete 180 as soon as the third quarter started. Obviously the big quarterback change, but that's one facet of the game. What does that do for the offense? Why is all of a sudden the Atlanta offense stop scoring? The Bears defense, they were great at times, and then they struggled in terms of they had some bad penalties in this game. And like I said, it's like both teams just completely switched sides. The second half. You had the Bears who literally I think had like 7 or 8 penalties in the first half. They just were a mess. They were a mess going into the second half. And the Falcons looked like they were running away with the game. What was it, 5 minutes into the third quarter, whenever Matt Nagy made that switch, all of a sudden, not only are the Bears chewing up yardage and giving the defense time to rest, but they're actually converting. They're converting with scores. And then to have a score like a touchdown taken away like they did, that could be crushing. That could be crushing for a team late in games, and to still come back and score. Yeah, it's. I think we have a quarterback controversy. Not so much of who's going to start. Is the controversy is what do we, or what do the Bears do now for the future? Remember, Mrs. Mitch is last year of his rookie contract. What does this say for him?
Yeah, but at the same time, speaking of which,
obviously the season's not over yet, but
no, it's not over yet. But I think one guy who definitely benefited did his job. I mean, yeah, if you're having the quarterback controversy, it's good to see a guy like Allen Robinson still step up to the plate. I mean, he was arguably their MVP on offense right there, netting 123 yards for receiving off of 10 catches, a touchdown, and I mean, when you really look at it, I mean, this is a guy who, I mean, when we heard like the last week or two was like trying to really go, him and his agent trying to do contract negotiations with the Bears for an extension right here. I mean, he took his Bears references off his social media, try and get some attention right here. For him to still ball out the way he did with whoever was quarterbacking in this game, whether it be Trubisky, whether it be Foles, that shows me right there, you still got your eye on the prize right there. That's doing your job, as Bill Belichick would say.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, especially that last touchdown pass that he grabbed. I think it was the second to last one because I think Miller got the last one. But that second to last one, I got them within a score. I think he basically tucked his shoulder in, just fought off 2 guys, and he turned what probably would have been a 5 or 6 play drive, assuming that the Bears would have scored, and he turned it into like a 1 or 2 play drive, which gave the Bears much more time to get back into the game. So he was huge today. The Bears, both quarterbacks did spread the ball around. Listen, they're 3-0. I don't know how I felt about the stat. I don't know if you saw it. It was before the game. They said last time the Bears were 2-0 was under Mark Trestman. Not sure how I felt about that. But regardless, you still want to win games. I don't care who is, what that
I
says.
think they were 3-0 to tell you the truth at that point.
Yeah.
They beat the Steelers for their third win, so I think it was 3-0 if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so there you go. To even emphasize that point more. I mean, you want to win every game, right? So it doesn't matter. When's the last time that they did that? And ironically, in that season, you mentioned, I think they went 3-0 and they didn't make the playoffs that year. So you can start off great, just as the Falcons, but if you don't finish, so we'll see. But your Steelers too, man. I mean, it's good to see them. I remember asking you, speaking of quarterbacks, how much does Big Ben got left in the tank? And you said you thought at least you thought he got a little bit left. How do you like him now after?
I will tell you this for right now. I mean, when you swing things back over to the Steelers, I'm glad that you mentioned that right now. And by the way, for those of you tuning in, we are talking Steelers and Bears right here on this special post-game edition here of the Matt Steel podcast. You can see on my left of the screen right here, PaulyC, the host of the new podcast show transitioning right now, the Fans Corner. You can make sure to check that out online on social media. He'll give you that information later on. Feel free to follow him on Twitter and Instagram at It's Me, PaulyC47 if you want direct questions or if you want to plug that little layer on the show. But the thing is with the Steelers, when you look at this right now, here's the reality of it. Last year, they got a big reality check when you lost a guy like Ben Roethlisberger with that throwing elbow for the rest of the season, which has never happened in his career. If anything, what would he be out for? Maybe like almost close to like a month and a half at worst before in the past. Not so lucky last year. You saw what they did, acquiring Mika Fitzpatrick the day that that they made it public that he was going to be on season-ending surgery with the throwing elbow right there. You traded for this guy. He's been kind of like a little bit no-show as of late. I mean, defense is still doing fine. But when you saw what they had to go for a year ago, when you had Mason Rudolph, Devlin Hodges right there, and especially doing away with Josh Dobbs that season 2 over to the Jaguars, you look at where they're at right now, and they could have made the playoffs last year. Bottom line is their defense started to run out of gas, if you ask me. They got fatigued. They were doing a lot of work right there. They're top. I think they were number 1 in takeaways at that point in time and sacks, total defense. I mean, they were like top 5 or 10 right there in those categories. And they just seemed to gas out, and they just started like getting exposed in like little situations in that 3-game losing streak with the Bills, the Jets, and of course the Ravens right there. It reminds you once again how important a piece like Ben Roethlisberger is. Yes, he's 38 years old, but when you look at him right now, I mean, yeah, he's gonna be still shaking off a little bit of rust. But I tell you what, some fans will be breathing a sigh of relief looking at like the defense you have right there, the talent. You still got legitimate weapons on offense right now. Some are making the argument that they might have found a new star receiver, which is no surprise what the Steelers have been mastering the last 2 decades under Kevin Colbert's watch. I mean, finding these gems and receivers where it is like a Santonio Holmes, Mike Wallace, and Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster. Now you got James Washington, who could arguably still be on the come up. Now you got a guy like Chase Claypool, who's about like similar size to what Martavis Bryant and Plaxico Burress used to be. You got a big target receiver right there. I have been in there captaining that ship. I mean, it's still like a breath of fresh air. The only thing is right now, what they need to solve right now is getting a legitimate running game consistently moving forward. Today, they were able to get at least like 169 yards on the ground, with 109 yards of those coming from James Conner and a touchdown. They didn't really show up much in like the first 2 weeks. They got that last 50-plus yard burst late in the game against the Broncos. And you see where they're at right now. The only thing is, Paul, when I look at it, with the Steelers starting off the season, I mean, you gave up 37 points to non-playoff teams from the year before, to losing teams. I have a problem with that. Today, I feel like they got a wake-up call from the Houston Texans. And, they gave up 21 points. That was it. But as usual, Mike Tomlin who's been pretty masterful. Whenever it comes to like a second half shutting out a team under Mike Tomlin's coaching career, he is 20 wins and he is 20-2 with a 909 win percent. 22-0 when Mike Tomlin shuts out a team in the second half. He's only lost 2 other times.
Wow.
That's impressive right there. And I just did that before we got in the air.
No, yeah, I've mentioned this to you before multiple times that I've always liked Mike Tomlin as a head coach, and anytime there's rumblings about that, what's his status in Pittsburgh? Will he be fired? I'm like, yeah, please send him this way. Please, yes, I would take that guy in a second. I think he's just been one heck of a head coach for the Steelers, and yeah, he's just one of those guys, man. He's just like I said, it's a lot to overcome. You mentioned it. I mean, losing Le'Veon Bell, losing Antonio Brown. I mean, those guys were. I mean, at the time, even though people may argue, yeah, they were kind of trending down, but they were still one of the top players at the positions at that time. And then to just leave like that and then have to replace that's a huge void. And to be able to do that so quickly, I think that's just it's amazing. I mean, and that's the mark of a good football team, because that happens. That's what happens over the course of a season, right? You lose guys get hurt. You have to, speaking of Nick Foles, who came in for Wentz, you have to be able to just, next guy up, pick up the slack. Stuff happens. Idealistically, you want a perfect season where next to no one's hurt and everything goes your way. But sometimes that's just not, it doesn't work that way, and you're going to have to find ways to make it work.
So let me ask you a question. When you look at the Bears season, what it sounds like from you, it's like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not like taking anything away. I mean, it's glad to be 3-0 right now at this stage in the season, but it almost seems like this is a team that is 3-0, but it's like you kind of have to kind of do with the Christopher Columbus statue back in downtown. You have to kind of cover it up with a sheet. No offense, though, but it's like it's almost kind of like this 3-0 win. It's kind of like there's still a little bit more meets the eye with this team. It's like they're buying an extra window of excuses and flaws they still got to make up for.
Yeah,
in a way.
In a ways, because I've made this point many a times on my show, The Fans Corner, and elsewhere, is that my biggest worry is the offense. Has been the offense for the last few seasons, even under Matt Nagy. I just think that to his credit, I think the play call has been. I haven't had a big issue with it, this year. I think he's grown. I mean, in terms of actually running the football, it seems like somewhat balanced. And as far as this season goes, hey, listen, you always got to keep it in the context, right? All these teams, it's not like they're beating world beaters here, right? It's like none of these teams made the playoffs last year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they face a team was either a playoff team or is playoff bound, coming this year. I think, was it week 7 or 8? So it's going to be interesting, but hopefully by then they'll be able to work out a lot of the problems. And I think you got a good head start because, I mean, we've talked about it many times that the problem has been the quarterback for the Bears in particular. It's just been the quarterback. He has had and appears to still have limitations. He struggles with just throwing the ball downfield. I mean, I'm almost not surprised that they made the switch the way the announcers were talking throughout the game. Just Matt Nagy, they just kept talking about reiterating some of the stuff he was saying about touchdowns. They need touchdowns. Field goals aren't good enough, which I think I've said to you multiple times. Yeah, that's typical Bears. It's just that was Trestman. It's like we're gonna dink and dunk, we're gonna chew up the middle of the field, but once we get to the red zone, we're stopped. And we have to, and we chewed up 7 minutes of clock, and we come up with only 3 points. So that's why you have to score touchdowns. And Mitch today excuse me, early, today, just he just didn't look like he had it. His accuracy was off. He looked completely lost. Foles, yeah, there was a little bit of a little bit of coldness there at the start, but you just saw it was this night and day difference. The crispiness, I don't know, crispiness, just how much better the ball was thrown. I mean, it looked like he was throwing tight spirals, and Mitch's passes were wobbly. They were just more crisper. It's just and fitted in those tight windows. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's one thing to throw it to the open guy, but fitting it in through a tight window where it's like there's only one place it can go in this little spot. If it goes anywhere else, it's picked off. Those are the throws you need those good quarterbacks for. And at least for today, Foles, it was great. It worked, but now going forward, who knows? Because the Atlanta Falcons weren't prepared for Nick Foles. They were preparing for Mitch. Next week, I forget who the Bears play, but whoever they face, they're going to be preparing for Nick Foles. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not about to annoy like, oh my God, their problems are solved. No, I think they got one issue kind of resolved. I mean, they got a guy who can at least move the ball down the field and stretch the defense. Can Nick?
All right, for Fightly Report.
Can he keep that over the course of his season? That's what we'll see. And then what does this do for Mitch's confidence? I mean, God forbid, what if Nick gets hurt? And then what? Now Mitch has to come in? It's like, oh yeah. So I'm surprised that Matt Nagy made the switch so early. But I mean, it's hard to argue with results. Yeah, and I said, the Bears they have more turnovers than the Falcons. They should not have won that game. I'm happy. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, and coming up throughout the rest of the season, they will be facing the AFC South and the NFC South this year. And speaking in terms of their schedule, I mean, there are two other oddball game outside those divisions. Will be against the LA Rams on Monday, October 26th. We still got ways to go from that. But right now, the Bears and Steelers, they do start off the season 3-0 right now for this moment. Real quickly, since I got you here, because tomorrow I'm going to be more than likely interacting with Mike Ditka on the phone during an interview.
Oh, nice.
And I'm sure you know where I'm going to go with this. Real quickly, from a Bears fan and perspective, Gale Sayers, the loss of Gale Sayers, just lost a great one this past week. No longer with us. Left at the age, I think, 77, I want to say it was.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy right here who I was just actually watching the Football Life documentary parts of it with him and Dick Butkus right there, and how his career was never the same. I mean, once the 70s came around the corner right there, got his knee, I think it was, operated on, got some shitty doctors right there. It pretty much just ruined his career trying to get him back on track. And the guy was pretty much heartbroken for the rest of his life at times, thinking about it. But how much can you tell, because we're always talking about Walter Payton when it comes to Chicago Bears football. I mean, his story, he's one of the top of the list. But where do you think people are missing the boat with a guy like Gale Sayers? And, what kind of special characteristics, performance, tributes he brought to, not only the Bears franchise and fans, but the NFL?
Well, I mean, he came in right with Dick Butkus, and those guys were drafted literally 2 and 3 in the same draft next to each other. So imagine that those guys coming into the league at that time, which, by the way, it is an absolute crime that they never made the playoffs with those guys. But that's for another show, because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But what he did for the Bears, I mean, it was electrifying. I mean, I have older friends who are Bears fans who've argued to me that Gale Sayers was the best running back that they ever saw. And these are guys who saw Walter play. And the way I differentiate the two running backs is, I mean, thankfully, for our beloved, my beloved Bears,
right.
They got two of the greatest running backs of history. And I always attributed their running styles to Walter Payton was the hammer, Gale Sayers is the knife. If you watch their styles, Walter Payton, dude, he just of course, you want an offensive line, but he didn't need one. I mean, he had this legendary forearm. He would just bull guys over. He had that leap. He would just some famous highlights of his where he's just leaping over piles of guys. He was just a guy was a monster, man. He was awesome. He was just a hammer. Gale Sayers, if you ever watch his highlights, it's like you wouldn't believe it. It's almost like you're watching like a magician. I mean, it's like almost like these guys. Like I always think to myself, was there a sniper in the building? Because you just see guys literally falling because they're trying to literally imagine a guy running at full speed without stopping, and he is, just juking and going this way and zigging and zagging. And just moving in every different direction. I always think to myself, without stopping in the building, because you just see guys fall. And he was just special to watch. He had some historic games and Wrigley Field when the Bears were still playing in Wrigley, and people don't realize he did all that damage in a 6-year NFL career. That's why I always call it the Gale Sayers rule. Going for it. That's what at least I call it for people who didn't have a lengthy career it doesn't have to be football, it could be any sport, but someone who didn't have a lengthy career but was so impactful on the game in the short time that they were with it that you have to recognize what they did. And Sayers did that. Devin Hester, someone I would kind of in a different way throw in that list. But guys who played for a short time and were so impactful. And he was one of them. He was one of them. It's a sad shame to lose a legend like that, especially one of the greats.
Yeah, definitely no doubt about it right there. I believe he died of natural causes. But like I said, I mean, most importantly, the Bears and Steelers, they do go 3-0. Definitely still early on the season. I mean, nothing, like I said, I'm really too excited about. I mean, just the only thing I can say for the Steelers, and I mean, that I was very proud of today was the fact that, I mean, Mike Tomlin's history of shutting out teams in the second half, that record he had right there over his career. And he's done that a lot more times right there. I mean, it may look a little, not always how you start, but how you finish right there. And that's what I feel for right now, because next up, now they got to go on the road against the Titans, while the Chicago Bears, next opponent, if I'm not mistaken, will be coming up against the Philip Rivers and the Indianapolis Colts in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, kind of I alluded to it earlier about their schedule. And now that I have it in front of me, I got, like you said, you just mentioned it, the Colts, Tampa Bay, Carolina, Los Angeles, the Rams, that is, New Orleans, right? So just look at those next 5 games. Just, so basically all those games up until New Orleans are very winnable for the Bears. So, I mean, they can have a nice, you can be looking at week 8 undefeated, possibly. And now, hey, don't, of course, I'm wishful thinking here, but I mean, none of these teams, that's why I mentioned earlier, none of these teams made the playoffs last year.
Where the hesitation's coming from.
Well, just the offense. Just
but not that though too. But I remember Bears fans had these similar starts before, back in 2011 and 2012.
Yes, exactly. I've seen this movie. You took the words right out of my mouth. I've seen this movie before. It's I've seen the Bears go 10-6 and not make the playoffs. That was the year Lovie Smith started off 7-1.
You may want to borrow Bill Murray's big huggable bear if like anything goes
wrong. Something. So borrow something. I want to borrow something. I don't know about that. But we mentioned earlier to start off the show, Mark Trestman was the last time this team started off. It was 3-0. It was when he was the head coach. So nothing's guaranteed. It's basically is what is my hesitation to start puffing out my chest and getting like, all right. I mean, we've talked before the season. I had a good feeling, still do, about the Bears going into the season, just in the stance that I think the NFC North is just an open division. I think it's really anyone's division. I can see anyone, even the lowly Lions, maybe not them, but it's definitely between the Vikings and the Packers. It's a it's up for grabs. And I really believe in the defense. Oh, and that's the other thing. I'm confident, but just hesitant because, like I said, it is early. But just like we've talked about, when they started the season, you saw the Bears brass, Ryan Pace and them, they're going with the same formula that worked well with them 2 years ago when they went to the playoffs and lost. And we all know in that game, which was they loaded up on the defense. All right. You load up on the defense and you have a complementary offense that can score enough points to win. And the defense has been they've been streaky. It's like they've shown flashes of their own selves where they're wow, they're bringing the heat. Like there were times today, I love Chuck Pagano's play calling today at certain times. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that was going on with the Falcons, that was penalties. That was that was part of the reason those drives got extended were bad penalties. Those roughing the passer penalties, I cannot stand. But I thought the defense played well today. I love the aggressive play calling of Chuck Pagano. We just don't know, right? Because context matters. Because you want them to. What we never saw with Mitch Trubisky, why I was always hesitant, is he never had a great game against a team that was over 500 or a playoff team. He beat up on the Vikings, but a team that was playoff bound, where it's like, okay, this is a really good football team, and he threw for, 3 or 4 touchdowns and 300 yards. He never had that game, and that's the problem. Is because it's great. It's great to win these games and beat up on these tomato cans, as the great Doug Buffon would say. These tomato can type teams. Where, it's great to beat up on them, but you're not going to face New York in the playoffs. You're not going to face probably the Atlanta Falcons in the playoffs. You're going to be facing a good team that you're going to have to, the other team's going to score too. So you're going to have to keep up with them. And remember, like I said, we were talking, that was my biggest worry coming into this game was them not being able to score points, which until the quarterback switch looked like it was going to happen.
Well, like I told you before, too, I will just remind you once again, take what you can get, because as of the moment, as it stands right now,
I love it.
Hold on. Hear me out. Check this out. The Bears right now are the only team in the NFC right now, as it stands, that is 3-0 in the NFC conference. So, if you think about that for a second, because when it comes down, if you have to sell for that wild card, remember – whoever you're tied with, head-to-head at the Apple Bowl, the number 2 spot, just in case you don't get that division, which probably a legit chance that may happen, best win-loss percentage in games played within the conference. That's the number 2 scenario when it comes for a wild card if you have to fall into that mold right there. So what I'm telling you is, for right now, take what you get for right now. Obviously, there's still a lot more hesitation, a lot more stuff you got to win over right now. We still don't know how impactful Tariq Cohen's loss is going to be, but if I'm a Bears fan or a Bears media or pundit, I'm looking at you took care of business in your conference at the end of the day, where you win ugly. Bottom line is you got the job done. You're living the fight another day with these wins right there, and you're buying more time to work on the improvements of this infrastructure.
Exactly. You can only – right? You can only play the games that are on your schedule. And when am I, I'm not arguing for the opposite. It's like, I would rather have them have great stats and then somehow lose the game like the Falcons. No, that's horrible. No, I agree with you 110%. You got to win these games. And they've won these games. And hey, listen, they're struggling now in certain aspects, but hopefully that doesn't continue down the line, right, as the season goes on, especially without a preseason, even though they should have the advantage because they haven't played in the preseason, but I digress. But, that's all you got to do. It's just, like you said, win the games that are in front of you. And all these games coming up are very winnable. That 8-8 season last year really did them a favor for this season because, there's not one game on this schedule, and I'm talking about the entire schedule now, where it's like, okay, that's a loss. It's like I could see them winning every single one of those games.
The good news is too. I mean, it also relates to this game. I mean, as far as like this season, I should say more or less. I mean, you got the things going on with COVID that was still unknown. I mean, the benefit from the Bears. I mean, aside from like not having any fan presence, especially when on the road, but you got your practice squad for all NFL teams expanded from 10 to 16 teams. And if someone happens to get placed on IR, I mean, for the season, as we take a look and see where the Bears stand on that area as it is for reserve and injured. You already got Artie Burns, former Steelers first round choice on there, along with Darian Clark, tight end, John Jenkins, nose tackle, Michael Joseph, defensive back, A. Pinheiro, your kicker right there on IR right now for reserve and injured for right now. Yeah. So, I mean, basically, remember that for all teams, for players who get placed on that list is usually for like about up to 3 weeks before they become eligible. So I think that will be huge right there because at the end of the day, you got more options of guys you could call up from the practice squad. Should you need an emergency fill-in somewhere right there, you got more options to play with end of the day.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll see it as the season goes on. Didn't we see it today for the Falcons was one of the first guys to actually miss a game because of COVID, was someone on the Falcons side of the ball.
Yeah, I actually heard that. I didn't get the exact name, but I do remember Am Schefter tweeting that earlier.
Is he the actual first player to miss a game because of testing positive?
So far for right now during the regular season, yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of how bad or if you can contain it and all that stuff.
But remember, too, with the reserve and COVID list, too, let's not forget, for this season, teams cannot, reveal, what kind of, personal, health issues they're going through. That's usually,
because of HIPAA laws?
Yeah, it's kind of, undisclosed right there. So, right there, they can't really, reveal that to the public. So that was quarterback A.J. Terrell you were talking about, who's got put on the reserve and COVID list. That's confirmed by Am Schefter and Brad Biggs of the Chicago Tribune, and who also, I believe, writes – well, he's also a contributor for the Mully and Haas show on 670 The Score right there, the Bear Download podcast co-pilot right there. Definitely a great contributor. Well, anyway, final closing thoughts real quick before we get out of here. Paul, what's your pulse going forward? I know you mentioned your hesitation, but what do you feel about next week going into the Colts game right now?
Well, I feel good in the sense that, listen, they're 3-0. The Colts are going to have a week to prepare for Nick Foles, so I'm sure that will change. Things, will be different in this. So I'm curious to see what also a week of game planning for the Bears offensively. Does the playbook now expand because Foles is in there? It's still a lot of questions for me in terms of the offense. Defense, I think they just gotta just keep doing what they're doing. Be clutch. That was the biggest thing for me with the defense is just be clutch. It's one thing to be great early in the game, but there's one thing that they weren't in those last couple of seasons, even the season when they had that playoff run, and I think you and I have even talked about this, is they were not clutch down the stretch, giving up these 90 – I think the announcer said it last year or last game that the Bears led the NFL in 95-yard drives. They gave up they gave 5 or 6 95-yard drives last year that led the NFL, talking about the Bears defense. So closing thoughts, there's some kinks in the armor that they need to work out, but I'm optimistic. We'll see what the quarterback change does. Hopefully now they continue to rack up wins while they're figuring this out. And man, so thanks again for having me. But so just close your thoughts too with your Steelers. How are they looking with their division chances now? He's still
you know what? It's going to be neck and neck, I think, with the Ravens all season long. I mean, for right now, bottom line, the Ravens are going to be facing the Kansas City Chiefs tomorrow on Monday Night Football. That's going to be the final game of the week, number 3 conclusion. That will be in Baltimore, by the way, right there, which Patrick Mahomes is undefeated. But I will say this right now. I mean, the last time they were 3-0 was a decade ago, which was back in 2010 when Ben Roethlisberger was suspended for the first 4 games of the season. Supposed to be suspended for 6 games. They did get the suspension reduced. Before they tried reducing it to 3, they couldn't get that done. So Charlie Batch, their backup quarterback at the time, did start in those starts right there. 3-1. Their only loss, which was, by the way, knock on wood, to the Ravens right there. But they did end up edging them out in the division, I think, based on their AFC North divisional record. And they went to the Super Bowl that year, too. So, I mean, not blowing too much hype into that, but if there's any one thing special I could say about that year, I'll gladly point to that. But let's just wait and see for right now. I mean, remember, I think the good thing is, too, remember, this is the first year we're going to be experiencing the expansion of the playoffs. One more seed per conference, which would go from 12 to 14 teams right now. So in both our cases right there, in both those teams, you could probably get in the playoffs with 8-8 record at worst if you happen to fall into that, or a 9-win season. You may not necessarily have to have 10 wins. I mean, with this expansion right here.
No,
you may be able to skate by with that.
Yeah, and that I concur with that assessment, and which bodes well for both our teams, especially because, like you said, I think that's the greater theme of today's show, which is it's still early, right? We're happy, we're thrilled that it's the best start you can ask for a team, is to win the first 3 games, but it's still early. And we've watched sports long enough to know that it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And they need this time to work out any problems they have, that they're having, I should say, because as you know, in the playoffs, cracks become crevices. Any problems you have during the season are only going to be amplified. So let's get it out of the way now. Let's work it all out. Get all the bugs out of the system before we get to when the games actually start to count. Every game does count, but you know what I mean. When all of a sudden playoff time.
And by the way, it's that time again for the Bears organization. You know what that is?
What?
Happy 35-year anniversary from last winning the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
35th year now. Banging that drum once again.
For being the founding franchise of the NFL, for being one of the cornerstone NFL franchise. It's again, that's talking about when I was saying earlier about it's being a crime. That's a sin. It's a crime and a sin to only have one Super Bowl win. And since the entirety of the Super Bowl era, it also goes to show you too. I mean, how much, if you really think about it, kind of like the Toronto Maple Leafs in a way, how much lesser competition you really have around that time. Because when you think about the 20th century, sports was barely starting to expand in that century right there. Baseball, obviously, I mean, was the founding sport. I mean, like since the end of the 19th century, you had boxing before then, the fighting sports. But realistically, during those times, up until the 1960s, there wasn't really a lot of teams in each sports league right there. So they benefited from that. And plus, once you finally got the competition, the AFL, and then which eventually led to the Super Bowl with the competition by both sides and the TV deals and the stadiums, which formed the Super Bowl right there. I really believe right there that brought the Bears a little bit more competition right there. I mean, where they had more they had to like deal with, a little bit of a road right there. That's all. I wonder sometimes if that was part of the reason. But end of the day, got the win right there, 3-0. Let's see if both teams can keep up right there. Paul, what projects you got coming up in the works? And just let everyone know that I have had this long hiatus because of COVID, and as you know, the CSR studios are been temporarily for a while, but they're shut down. I mean, they will come back, but in the grander scheme of things, seeing as how COVID is still raging, the studios are going to be closed for the time being. So I will be taking the Fans Corner show, which I had on ChicagoLandSportsRadio.com, and I will basically be bringing that to podcast form. I'm going to have, hopefully soon, I'm going to just have a channel set up. I'll have 2 separate podcasts.
And where can they follow you again?
You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter on It's Me, PaulyC47. So, yeah, just keep a close eye on my social media, and I'll be launching that and putting out episodes soon. We're going to cover sports, pop culture, entertainment, and, of course, pro wrestling. So look out for that.
You're definitely the pro wrestling whiz in my eyes, talking with you off to the side around that. I could definitely tell it's one of your brother and brothers aside from football and stuff right now. I'll be honest with you right now, with all this COVID, the craziness, guess what? With sports coming back, I mean, you got to admit, this is a cool time to be a sports fan, even though we're watching with less crowd right there. All this stuff happening at once right now. You got the Stanley Cup playoffs just about to wrap up right now. NBA Finals about to be set right now. LeBron James goes to his 10th overall NBA Finals. The Lakers 32nd as a franchise away, the winner of the Heat Celtics right there in the Eastern Conference. And you got the baseball playoffs getting ready to start up in less than a couple days right there. Cubs and Sox both in it right now. I mean, you got a lot of stuff happening at once right now. And then guess what? Bears are 3-0 along with the Steelers.
I mean, how playing with house money, or how can you not be happy? I mean, like you just said, Bears are 3-0.
As much as all this craziness we got with COVID, it also brought us a lot of like good variety in the way with the sports at the same time.
Well, it definitely reminds me, at least, that sports, or I definitely miss sports, and it's nice to have the distraction. You mentioned everything going on with the craziness in COVID and our politics. It's nice to have the distractions of sports again, even though politics have strayed into sports a little, but that's okay.
I wish President Trump and Joe Biden would just sell in the old-fashioned way, go in the ring in a steel cage for the presidential election.
Oh, God. Well, I think Trump would probably have the edge. Remember, he did have a WrestleMania match that he tackled Vince McMahon. Didn't you see?
Or you know what? No, a Money in the Bank ladder match for the presidential race.
He's a WWE Hall of Famer.
Hey, have the briefcase hanging up in the rafters right there. You want to find out who the next president is?
The Constitution will be in it. Yeah,
a ladder right there.
Hey, you know what? I don't know if
that's what they should do.
I don't know if it'll be as entertaining as the debate coming up.
But you know what? They don't have to be in the ring. They don't have to be in the ring. They could choose their opponents in the ring. They could be the managers right there at ringside.
Okay. Oh, that would be. Yeah. No. Well, you gotta do like Trump did in that. Was it WrestleMania 23? Loser gets their head shaved.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Have some fun with it.
Well, yeah, definitely. We'll see. But
I won't be surprised if Vince McMahon finds a gimmick match somewhere along. At the slate.
No, of course. He never stops working. But you mentioned pro wrestling, man, and just sports. It's just I think now where we as a society, not just here in the U.S. but across the world, we see that COVID is here to stay for the short run or however long it's going to, and we need to find a way to adapt. And this is going to be a new way of life for at least I would imagine the year, and we'll see. I mean, I didn't think they were going to be able. I know we were talking in previous shows. I didn't think they were going to be able to get sports in. I'm glad that they figured out a way. Obviously, safety first, but and I think that's always the key, right? You have to respond. You have to work. You just adapt or die, as they say. Maybe it's not the best phrase to use with that, but I mean that's basically it. Adapt. You have to adapt. You have to overcome, because I mean the alternative is there is nothing. So we'll see. For the time being, we got sports, and I'm happy to talk about it. Glad you're still doing what you're doing on a weekly basis, and I can't thank you enough, dude, for having me again, Charlie. Appreciate it, man. And I would love to be back soon.
Definitely we'll do this again. We'll probably do this let's try and aim for the halfway mark of the season, week 8. See where everything starts off with a little halfway mark. See where we line up here.
Okay, so all right. Well, then we gotta give a little prediction. I know
do like a quarterly thing give a little right prediction now.
So at the so I mean,
what, was it 4
wins? Okay, quarterly. Okay, so yeah, I see what you're saying. So I believe at
and I'll have it back out like around then.
Yeah, I think there'll be 4. I'll say it'll be 5-2 by week 7. I'll say 5-2.
Well, that's 7 games. I mean, you need one more game.
Then I'll say 6-2.
Okay, remember their 8th game will be against the New Orleans Saints right there, by the way.
Yeah, that'll probably be one of them. I mean, if they're going to lose, I think the 2 that look like they can potentially have really a tough time is Tampa Bay and New Orleans. Everyone else, Indianapolis,
you can still
Carolina.
put an argument in there for the Rams, too. The Rams, you could still make a case for right there. Remember, the Rams, I think, were banged up last year. And Bears
they've had success.
Advantage of
they've had success with the Rams in recent history.
Yeah.
And they don't have Todd Gurley anymore. And that's how good I'm feeling about the Bears. I think the offense will hopefully get worked out. And I'm basing it off strength of schedule. You know, they have a nice schedule that favors them, which is why I think they're good enough to rack up some wins in the first half of the season. So I think 6-2 for the Bears. And for your Steelers, I'll just go ahead and say I'm going to say 5-3 because I think they have a tougher road. They may have a tougher game here and there.
I'll probably say 6. I'll probably say 6-2 at the most right now. Probably like their first pair of losses will probably come up against the Titans and probably the Ravens. I'd hate to say, because I mean after that, you got the Titans coming up this Sunday. Then the following week, you got the Eagles, the Browns, and the Ravens in Baltimore. So I could see like a pair of losses between the Titans and Ravens right there at that point. But I'll make it like probably like 6-2.
That's what I'm saying.
Maybe
I think they'll still.
I mean, we'll still see that too.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. It wouldn't surprise me if they go, honestly, because like I said, for me, I base it off straight to schedule and the hope that the Bears offense seemingly has somewhat now started to go in the right direction. Now we'll see. We're going to see 2 things. But teams coming up are now going to be preparing for Nick Foles, assuming that he's the starter going forward. And now teams, and now hopefully Nick Foles will bring another facet to the offense that we haven't seen with the Bears in the last couple seasons.
Great. All right. Well, Paul, I wanted to say I can't thank you enough, man. Glad to see you doing well right there, you and the family and everything. Just wanted to say I'm proud of you. Continue what you're doing your media career off the side over here. Great stuff as always, man. Always a pleasure to keep in touch with. Once again, that's the K-Man right there. K-Man on the mic. You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram, as he mentioned. That it's me, PaulyC 47. And for myself, at Prodigy Richie on Instagram, Mount Steel Podcast on Twitter at Mount Steel CGR, and on Instagram at Mount Steel Nation. For the Mount Steel Podcast, Charles and PaulyC signing off. Don't be trolling, be rolling. We on. Thanks a lot, Paul.